right. This is kind of long. I'm not sure if we'll watch the whole thing, but I think we should give some of it a watch and see what we think. So let's get started. Everybody ready? Here we go.
Here we are, another Final Fantasy XIV MSQ done, and as usual, some of you are curious to hear my thoughts, which is great because I love to talk, especially about thoughts I have. This video, however, took much longer to put together than I originally thought it would. Figuring out what I wanted to say and how best to express it forced me to write a lot of it down and then draft and redraft it all into a script and somehow include all I've got.
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing a Dawntrail review.
Start with Dawntrail. I feel like,
and same feeling. Where do you start?
Story, we need to start in the last expansion. Endwalker was the culmination of years of storytelling and loose thread pulling finally paying off. I cannot stress how much I enjoyed Endwalker, not just as a game, but as an experience. I don't claim to know how you felt. I don't know if it was just my life experiences or age or what, but the message of Endwalker really stuck with me. It's a beautiful look at purpose,
Endwalker was really beautiful.
Loss and existential dread. I laughed, I cried, I came out the other side feeling refreshed, like in my soul, man. Was it a perfect experience? No, there's plenty of room for critique. Sometimes it felt like you were running from story moment to story moment, but that was easily forgiven on my part because the entire time I was like, well, they do have a lot of story to wrap up, so this is fine. It's really what I wanted.
That's
what
also
they did
true.
Right or wrong, they delivered on an emotional connection that I didn't even know I could.
This bit, I only just did this bit and it made me cry.
Was very curious how they'd handle the follow-up, especially considering they just ended a 10-year story arc. How do you start over in an MMORPG?
How do you start over?
It is not done often, mostly because
you apparently go to the
hard to do. It's the Dragon Ball Z problem. You've battled and defeated the greatest threat in the universe. Where can you possibly go from there? As far as I see it, you've got three options. 1, you reset the main character's power level, removing all they've gained and starting them over. 2, a new and even more powerful threat arises that you didn't know about before that is somehow stronger than the universe-ending threat. Or 3, the story takes on an entirely different focus, away from the previous main character. And certainly, there are pros and cons to each, especially in a video game. If you reset the character's power level, sure,
I've actually
way to say
only ever seen occasional episodes of Dragon Ball.
Anything gained over the last, in this case, 10 years.
Is that
From a
evil
Final
of
Fantasy
me?
14 player standpoint, we all see people complain about job changes. Can you imagine if they just started everyone over at level 1 again? Oh my god, the outrage. That said, it would finally allow the devs to create a fresh start for new players who may not want to go through the previous 100 hours of content to catch up. Creating a new threat is always an option, but creating a new, even worse one often cheapens everything that came before. This is one of the big problems I have with a lot of MMORPGs, because they're purposefully designed not to end and keep people playing as long as possible. They consistently come up with an even bigger bad guy you weren't aware of until now, and yeah, I guess it's fine and
even bigger bad guy, biggest of bad guys.
Most MMORPGs,
biggest
people
of the
are not
bad.
playing for the story. They're, about the community and playing with friends. But in the case of Final Fantasy XIV, where story is the thing, you can't really fight the literal embodiment of despair at the edge of the universe and then immediately be like, there's actually something worse. That would be crazy. So we come to our last category, pick a new focus. And I think it's safe to say that was the choice of the dev team for Dawntrail. Not for the long run, obviously, but as a break from the escalation and to introduce a new land.
That's
it's
true.
an attempt to do something different, and sometimes that lands well.
Yeah,
and sometimes you
good
wonder
moment.
what the hell they were thinking. With that said, it allows your character to continue being the biggest badass in the universe while also introducing new characters, cultures, lands, and concepts. And let me be very clear, I understand why some people might not like that. We just went from being the main character in a story about us, our past, and what it means to be a hero, and it's jarring to suddenly be second fiddle to a character we barely know and who you may not even like. And I guess because for months before launch on various podcasts and shows, I had this attitude of, this is gonna be them throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what sticks. Kind of a Realm Reborn vibe. None of it really bothered me. I was never really a huge fan of Realm Reborn. I quit at level 40 for years. So I was more excited about the hints we'd get about the future rather than what the main story of this expansion would be. And maybe that's my bad, because while everyone's talking about Wuk Lamont or Solution 9, I'm over here freaking out about the new MacGuffin, potentially doing some sort of Indiana Jones-style quest where we follow in the footsteps
The
of our past life, or
MacGuffin.
that sweet Malala lore. In fact, I've been over here dropping predictions about what we're going to see on every podcast and show that will let me. I am fully convinced we are going on some sort of Azemgers Assemble storyline. Yeah. And I don't know if that's cope, and frankly, I don't care, because that's awesome. I was like, dude, let's go. So if this whole thing is the start of us going down the adventure to be like, it was always us. Like, yo, that would be awesome. But in the immediate, I was mentally prepping for a Realm Reborn. And I think we got something akin to that, and a little bit of Stormblood too. In both cases, I firmly believe we were not necessarily the main character. In A Realm Reborn, we're
I
caught
would
up in
agree.
events orchestrated by others, and in Stormblood, it is very clearly Lisa's story. Both serve to introduce new lands, concepts, and characters that will later be important to the story they intend to tell, and when they pay off oh so well. And that's really how I feel about Dawntrail. This is the start of something new. They're laying the groundwork and decided to do it by introducing another part of the world through the eyes of a character who lives there. A character who barely knows us.
It's
We're
weird
just a
watching
friend of a friend who was
MSQ
asked to
played
join on an
by
adventure to a distant land,
somebody
help them
else, because I'm always like,
what any other day of the
where's
week
the
would have
Warrior
just
of
been a
Light?
side quest for
Just
us.
assuming the
There were
Warrior of
many
Light is
times
me.
during the story I actively called out, like, just let me off the leash. I can one-shot this guy. But I had to sit back and watch someone else make the choices, screw up, and overcome their mistakes. At first, it was kind of frustrating. I think I said it more than once that this must be what Ardbert felt like. Unable to actively do anything, being forced to watch us make mistakes and grow, even when things got truly terrible. He couldn't fight our battles, but he stood by our side for all of it until the end. And that thought alone made me reevaluate Shadowbringers and previous expansions. Certainly, we feel like we're the hero throughout our entire time playing, but it really isn't until Shadowbringers and the events that take place there do we actually become one. And Ardbert is there to talk to us and guide us, not as a mentor, but as a friend who understands us.
If you need a push, I'll be right there behind you. If you lose control, I'll do my best to stop you. So, let us be about it, hero.
Oh, this is so... Oh, Ad! Why at that moment? No! I was gonna say this is so nostalgic, and then the ad's like, hey, what's up?
And I believe is the message and moral of the story. A hero isn't the person who goes around beating the crap out of monsters. A hero inspires others to greatness, and it's repeated throughout the story. We who walk before may lead those who walk after. My friends, we literally walked to the end. Once I got into this mindset for Dawntrail, the experience of the entire expansion changed. Yes, it's our vacation that ends with a weird sci-fi twist, but mostly we bring a smile
Not weird
and
sci-fi
understanding to
twist.
Wuk Lamont
Good,
as she
awesome
experiences
sci-fi
a hero's
twist.
journey. Roughly the same one we went on over a 10-year period, but for her, in just one expansion. Dawntrail contains the world building of A Realm Reborn, the machinations of Heavensward, the tale of a young woman trying to lead her people in Stormblood, otherworldly twists of Shadowbringers, all culminating with the main character being forced to tackle existential questions similar to Endwalker. Even some of the characters who missed the final zone of Endwalker, Kryl and Erenville for example, got to have their existential moment that we all had back in Ultima Thule. Does it land completely or satisfy everyone? Clearly not. But once I was in that headspace, it just resonated with me. Maybe it's being a former teacher or just being on the older side of content creation, doing this for nearly 15 years and seeing young talent come up after you and do amazing things. I guess I'm just more than happy to help Wuk Lamont in any way that I can. She's a joyful,
that's a really
spirited
sweet
youth
way
a
of
trope
looking at
who
it.
Saves the day by making friends, and
I mean, I
feel
like
after
Wuk
coming
Lamont.
out
I
two
think she's
expansions
really
where
likable.
they were
I don't know
definitely
what
trying to
people's
make you
problem
cry,
with her is.
I found
I
it
really
cute.
don't.
Plus, it reminded me of what the Warrior of Light used to be like before we went down the rabbit hole of despair. With that said, however, it does bring up a major issue with the devs' choice to make the game Wuk Lamont focused. You're playing a video game. Sitting by and letting someone else solve things or take the lead while you just stand there like, do I nod now? Is kinda lame. In fact, multiple times during this expansion, I was thinking, I could just call up some dragons, or Sid, or Doma, and we could handle this all right now.
But technically we did
Then
call
I
up
had to readjust
dragons.
and remember that I'm just here to help. It's my vacation. Her journey isn't ours to take, which is why we're not interfering. We're just being supportive. Like I said before, we in this moment have become Ardent.
Oh,
We'll be
excuse
right behind her if
me.
she needs a
Sneezy,
push, but
sneeze.
it's not on us to do this. If Wuklamot gave up, we'd probably just go find something else to do. And that can be frustrating as a player. From a storytelling perspective, I think it's
I was
fine.
not
Our
frustrated.
character has grown
I
so
totally
much,
wasn't
we are now
frustrated at
supporting
all.
others,
It didn't
and
bother me
imparting
slightly.
nuggets of wisdom it's fine character growth. But as
This
a
is making me
video
hungry,
game,
but-
it's not necessarily something I would prefer to play, especially if an upbeat cat girl isn't something you enjoy. Again, going back to Stormblood, where the focus was Lise. Rewind time with me, if you will. There were a lot of people out there who did not like Lise. Exact same vibe. But Dawntrail, just like Stormblood, and this is a hill I'm willing to die on, has some amazing dungeons and raids and music and visuals, graphics, locations, all that stuff. It's beautiful. It's some of the best work they've ever done. Plus, it opened up the world dramatically, just like this expansion has done. And after focusing so heavily on Lise, she retired into the background as the leader of a nation, and now when she shows up, no matter what you thought of her, you're like, oh damn, Lisa's here! I have a feeling that as the story goes on, it's going to be the same way with Wuklamot. Although, they really haven't managed to overcome the issue that was a major problem in Stormblood.
What
And it's the same
did
problem
people
here for this
complain-
expansion, I think.
Why did
The
people
pacing's
who
kind of all over the place.
don't
Yes,
like
Dawntrail does an
Dawntrail
excellent
complain
job for lore
about
nerds like
this
myself, giving me
review?
just enough
Because
to
I
put
think
together
he's
threads of
being
past knowledge,
pretty
like
harsh on
learning the script on the
Dawntrail.
walls, and the cenote are ancient.
Does anyone else
island
think he's being
Lalafell
pretty
texts,
harsh on
and knowing that
Dawntrail?
a journal entry mentions ancient Lalas who fled an island between the calamities, and here I am, not even halfway through this expansion, thinking, so how on earth did Lalafells from our world manage to travel to another reflection? And then I'm like, oh my god, that conversation Emmett and Hythlodaeus had, Endwalker, where they were like, yeah, Asm ran into a volcano the other day, that was pretty crazy. And now I'm thinking, volcano? The one on the island? How does that work? What's the time difference? It was an awesome moment for me, and I was so happy they were doing that. But on the flip side, things like Zoralja going from being kind of a dick to complete psychopath, off screen in a time warp of 30 years, didn't really land for me at all. Or the pace at which we dealt with Valagramanda. We see the boss is set free, we fight the boss in such a quick succession that it didn't come off as any sort of threat at all, despite being told repeatedly how much of a threat it was. Which is hilarious when the
I
repercussions for
suppose
Baku Jaja
that bit
setting
could
it
have
free
had a
are
little bit
almost
more,
non-existent. Like,
a little
dude,
bit more
people could have
of
died. In
of
fact,
yeah,
after that,
Valagramanda
Baku Jaja
killing
gets a near
people.
instant, his parents were shit, so you can understand how he
But
became a bad egg. Let's redeem him and make the internet
it was
horny.
already
And
like
again,
pretty
to be
lengthy.
clear, it wasn't anything that really
So
got to me, but it was noticeable. It doesn't stop the fact that in the end I did in fact think Bakul was the Bakulist, but it's undeniably weird pacing. I think maybe because, like me, they were focusing on threads for long-term development, so threats like a boss you fight at level 93 aren't really that important, but up until that battle, everyone sure talked like it was important. But it just turned out to be another step on our quest to help Wuklamot sit on the throne. And I think it's kind of a clever way to introduce new peoples and cultures to us, especially considering we're incognito the entire time. No one knows who we are. Hell, Wuklamot doesn't even really. And the game does a great job of reinforcing this over and over, from Mamulja mentioning their friends who went to Eorzea, who we definitely killed, to Wuklamot asking us to stay
we
and serve as part of our
definitely
staff.
killed.
You, me, everyone knows that is not happening. But again, she doesn't really know us. Not only does this expansion serve as a vacation from our world-saving antics, but also a vacation from the responsibility of ourselves. There's no way we're just gonna stay in Tuliolol ever. So we ditch almost immediately and go to Dinosaur, Texas with Erenville. Quick side tangent before we move on here with the rest of the story. I must mention my biggest disappointment with this expansion. This guy right here. Jaja Jafar. He
didn't last
so
long.
much I'm actually the big bad potential, and I'm just gonna say it was way better fleshed out as a character just from a few lines that I thought for sure Zoralja would be killed off by this guy. And the fact that this happens, look, I'm still holding out hope my boy will return, but color me disappointed. Perhaps the reason I enjoyed him as a side character was because He was just so straightforwardly evil. I knew who he was right away. Meanwhile, Zoraljah was dealing with the expectations of greatness and trying to be better than his father and all those sorts of things that weren't ever really given time to develop on screen. And I think that's the case for a lot of characters in this expansion. They were never really given the time for us to connect with them in any sort of meaningful way. There were just so many of them.
I don't know if I'd agree with
so
that.
So much was going on. I 100% believe the Scions
I feel like we had a lot of
should not
time
have
with
been part of this
people.
story
I
till
agree
the
with that,
halfway
though.
point. If anything, this story should have been about you joining Erenville in helping Wuk-Lamont, with Kryl tagging along because of her story reasons. No twins at all, despite me loving the twins. They should have just stayed
I
in
agree.
Garlemald for
No
the time being.
twins.
This could, one, serve to reinforce the idea that the Scions are still at least publicly disbanded, and two, give us plenty of time to learn more about not just new characters, but also flesh out the storylines for Kryl and Erenville. And in this made-up scenario, I'm fine with Thancred and Urianger being there to help Kona, but like, they don't need to be. They could stay behind if I'm being honest. Estinian, on the other hand, needed everywhere, all the time. More Estinian, please. Thank
More
you.
Estinian,
But I'm
please. I
convinced
totally agree.
this was a major issue.
More
I don't
Estinian,
think they knew what to do with the Scions.
please.
But we all know we love them and don't want them not to be a part of the story. I get it, it's a tough call to make. In my perfect world, we'd have plenty of time to learn about the four claimants to the throne, characterize them a bit more, maybe make Bakul Jaja someone who we really want to cheer on, so when it happens later, it's like, yeah! Create that deep reasoning behind Zoraljah's betrayal. Give Wuk-Lamont and Kona more opportunities to develop their connection. Then, when the big battle moment occurs later, and all the dragons show up, which admittedly was very cool, the Scions could arrive just like they do, and we get like a Kryl said you might need a scene, and then just like we see, they stomp the enemy. Like I said before, we're the biggest
that would have been
badasses
cool.
in the universe.
That would have been pretty cool.
This enemy is nothing. It would have been a great moment. Yeah, sure, we'd miss the Scions at the start, but when they all finally show up, it would be a reason to cheer. Just like in the game when a few of them do arrive later, I was excited to see them. It's moments like that with a few changes I think could have done wonders for this expansion. I just keep thinking if, for example, Zoraljah was given more of a gifted youth approach to his story. You know, the kid who's told he's amazing in his youth and by the time he's an adult completely burns out because he never really had to practice or work for anything.
Yeah, again,
I think that'd be an amazing approach. Zoraljah could be crushing the early stages of the contest.
Pretty
maybe
harsh
even
on the
helping others
game,
because
no?
as far as he sees, like, we're kind of weak and we kind of suck,
I mean, he's
and he's
pointing
doing so
out
much better than
positive
us,
things
so he'll still
too,
help out,
but
he definitely deep down
overall
knows he's gonna win
is
until he faces his father's
complaining
echo
a lot
and
about the
loses,
game. So
realizing that
why do the
despite what
haters
everyone
have a
has said,
problem with
he
this?
is in fact not better than his father.
Why do they
Then
have a
to see
problem with
his
this?
lesser
What?
Wuk-Lamont win, it could send him into some sort of narcissistic collapse, and that's when he really loses his way. He starts to become bitter and angry, and cut to 30 years later, after he's been stuck in that time warp, my man's just been stewing so long about his father and his family, and his desire to win and rule and do better than everyone else, it would add so much weight to the murder of their father, plus also make Wuk-Lamant's decision to kill him all the more heartbreaking. Because the guy she knew just days before, who was terribly flawed but still a good brother, is no longer the man she sees before her. And the crazy thing is, that all kind of is what happens, except it's not really given any time to develop on screen. We just have to assume that is what has occurred. All right, enough nitpicking for now.
I did that.
Let's get to the meat of the story.
That is what I
Solution 9,
assumed.
The Endless, and Sphene. All of which were supremely interesting, but just, again, not given nearly enough time. Yes, I was completely invested for lore reasons and the unanswered questions to be revealed, but story-wise, it all happened rather quickly. And in that, at least as far as I saw, also kind of negated the message of the first half of the expansion. In my mind, the whole point of the contest was for Wuk-Lamont to go on her I'm learning about the peoples of Tyral and trying to understand their cultural differences in order to lead them and unite them for the better. But then the reveal that the Malmuja are actively trying to create two-headed children, resulting in countless deaths and the rise of assholes like Bakul Jaja, I assumed the lesson she learned there was some cultural traditions are actually terrible and shouldn't be respected. That as a leader, you sometimes have to call people out on this who have lost their way and show them a better one, even if they've spent generations at it. But then seeing Waklamut so easily taken in by Sphene, despite seeing how entirely messed up the society she created is, and how their cultural traditions of erasing people from memories is totally bonkers. The amount of times I was like, Waklamut, do not trust this woman! Yet at the same time, for us, because of everything we know and have been through as characters, Sphene and Geralja never really felt like a threat. Again, it has the vibe of a side quest. I kept thinking, these villains are punks, I could handle this, just let me. And that's reinforced at the end when Sphene teleports everyone out of the room and is like, you seem like a guy who needs to be deleted right now. And that same knowing what we know as the characters we're playing for the last 10 years impacted the moral quandary this expansion tried to present. A world created to keep the memories of the dead alive. Sphene being an AI designed to protect her people at all costs, seeing loved ones once thought lost and being forced to say goodbye again. There's a lot of good stuff there, and in the context of Kryl, Erenville, and Waklamut, who haven't had their Ultima Thule moment, that's pretty emotional for them. But because we, the player, and our character, have already had ours, we already came face to face with despair, we and our friends were willing and did sacrifice ourselves to save everyone who was back on our world, the idea of shutting down servers to stop an AI queen from killing all those people we just got done sacrificing for, just to keep the memories of the people who were dead alive, I was like, yo, shut her down. I have already experienced something like this and come out the other side. The hell I'm gonna let someone try and trick me with the memory-based recreation of my friend's hot mom. But again, all the story we're getting there is not for us. It's for Waklamut, it's for Kryl, it's for Erenville. The thing that's for us is all the little hints of what's to come. And I absolutely loved that, let's be very clear. Alexandria was awesome. I enjoyed all of it because there were things that I was like, oh, what's that mean? I loved the Final Fantasy IX references. I loved walking around in the volcano, potentially getting more Asm lore. And what can I even say about the key, Sphene's crown? Okay, a lot actually, and we will, but again, the pacing was so fast-paced and it wasn't necessarily about us. There's also preservation, which I don't really know what that's about. There's Zeralja's kid? Who the hell's the mother? What's that about? What's going on there?
Yeah, I was like, what?
I thought that was a clone. And just when I thought we were going to get answers to that, they were like, have you heard of Otis? Because let's talk to him for a minute. Which, by the way, love me some Otis. I guess what I'm trying to say in this video that has probably gone on way too long is that I found so much to love in this expansion that I focused on that, and I enjoyed that tremendously. I mean, I was deep diving theory crafts that probably don't make any sense, but felt like they might.
He said he loved it?
For example, when Sphene uses the key,
even though he tore it apart for the whole video?
Why does that look so similar to the portal in the Nier raid? Is that coincidence? Is that something important? Probably not, who knows? I focused on it and I thought it was neat. So I'm over here just excited and waiting for patches. Come on, Azemgers. Now, maybe reviews like this are a bit too early. No matter what you think of Stormblood, the patch content is some of the best they've ever done. The run-up to Shadowbringers was amazing, and I'm holding out hope we'll get the same here, especially with all the different fun things they're trying to introduce. Which we should definitely talk about because that's really what I want to talk about, and I'm willing to go down the rabbit hole and just have fun with it because that's really what I care about. I love theory crafting! First, it is very clear from this expansion and previous expansions that our original self, the last Azem, was up to something, especially since they weren't around in any capacity during the final days. And as we learned from the Pandemonium raids, informed Elidibus that we were coming to him. So how did previous us know that? Something's up there, and I assume it's all timey-wimey. My hope, of course, is that the new MacGuffin, the key, will lead us down the path to finding out more, and potentially the main arc of Final Fantasy XIV to come. Could Azem see the future?
I assume that.
Previous victory, but
I assume that's the case too, yes.
That leads to something worse later on? My hope, and I'm just going to put it in this video so we have it on record because I've been talking about it for years and years and years, all the way back in 2021, because Azem is the traveler, the explorer, and so obviously us exploring, we as Azem are going to discover more of the lore of who we are. But I love the idea of us going on some sort of world-spanning adventure, maybe even reflection-spanning adventure, where we have to follow in the footsteps of our former self. Not only learning about who we once were, but also learning what they were up to. maybe we may not like who that person was. Or maybe on this quest, in order to get to the end, we must have a complete version of ourselves. But the only way to do that is to draw everyone together, all the other reflections of us, and become some sort of, I don't know, Azemgers Assemble team? I think it would be fun. Plus, there's all sorts of other things that we don't really know about, but have become a thing here at the end. Sphne's crown, for example. Why show that screen? Is it because it will in some way bring her back? Or is it deeper and maybe the symbol on the crown is part of our Asian mask? And don't even get me started on my crackpot theory that the shoe bill, the one we all thought was associated with Emmett, is actually Azem's familiar who's been watching over us. As you can tell, I'm putting all my chips into this basket because I really want it, and I think it'd be super fun. Even if you don't, I do, and I'm making this video, so that's what engrossed me in this expansion. It's what I wanted, it's what I was excited for. They gave me just enough to kind of believe that maybe I'm correct, and the seeds planted here could grow in any number of ways, maybe ways I'm not even thinking of yet. But I'm excited for the future of what the game potentially could be. And that's why delivering a fine but not great expansion doesn't mess me up all that much. This is the start of a new adventure. It's hit or miss, and it could be the start of something potentially amazing. Sure, it could lead to failure. That does happen, but knowing where the game came from and how they've listened to players and how they've delivered and overcome previous setbacks, there is so much good here that any complaints I have about story isn't going to quelch my excitement for where this can all
so this is what
go.
pissed people
and now
off.
that the expansion's in the past and there's nothing I can do to change any of it, the only thing left to do is forge ahead. Here's looking to 7.1 and the patches beyond. I'm really excited, and I hope maybe a little bit you are too.
Yeah, until the end, I didn't really see what people were bitching about. I felt like he presented, a pretty fair, from his perspective, analysis of the expansion, the goods, the bads, and where he wants things to go from here. And I guess what pissed people off was where he ended it by saying, even if parts of the game weren't perfect, doesn't matter, still had a great time. Apparently that's enough to get angry. Which is pretty crazy, because I didn't really have the complaints. I thought the Dawntrail was pretty lengthy. I thought that things were expanded upon really well. I felt all the things that he seemed to want more development on, I already felt we had enough development on those things. So I'm really not sure I necessarily agree with a lot of his complaints. I would say I probably have some of my own complaints to make, which I will leave for, a later time, assuming I ever actually make my own review video. But I do think it's crazy that people are all hating on a balanced review that didn't say, it wasn't like, Dawntrail's the best thing ever, yeah! And even if it did say Dawntrail's the best thing ever, what does it matter? Seriously, what does it matter if one person enjoyed it? And this is gonna send me off. Hang on, let me take off my headphones. This is gonna send me off on a freaking rant. But I just don't get why people feel the need to get so upset about how someone else enjoys something. What do you care if someone likes this song and you don't? What do you care if someone enjoyed Dawntrail and you didn't? It doesn't matter! It doesn't matter! Oh, it doesn't matter in the slightest. And yet, here we are, people bitching. Yeah. You're right, people are really toxic about Dawntrail. People are very, very toxic about Dawntrail. I personally don't know what it is about Dawntrail that made people react in such a way. Because sure, there are good things about it, there are negative things about it, but I had such a wonderful time. I loved the characters. I loved the story. I loved where it ended up. I think there's, like Jesse Cox said, there's a lot of little lore things sprinkled in that if you're a lore fan, you would just be all over, like Jesse Cox was. And yeah, like you said, the voice actor for Wilklamut got seriously harassed, or is still getting seriously harassed. I'm not sure. Yosh P essentially had to kind of send out something saying, you know what? Could you stop harassing? Could you stop harassing, please? Because it's just ridiculous. What reason is there possibly to harass a voice actor for a character they voiced? Whether you like the character, don't like the character, what is the point? Why would you do that? It's, people are just toxic. Toxic. Ugh. Well, that puts me in a grumpy mood. The video was great, though. The video was a great rundown of Dawntrail again, a good refresher. So I'm ready for patches. I'm all ready for patches now. So I've had a refresher, and now my brain is ready. When do we get patches? Not yet, I don't think. Not yet.